Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to evaluate rational expressions for given values of each variable. So you can be given these rational expressions, like the first one, the rational expression is 4 divided by 6x plus 2. And the second one is this rational expression, and the third one is this rational expression, and so on. What you want to do with these rational expressions is for each value of x, or the variable, it could be y, whatever the variable is, you want to evaluate this rational expression. So remember what evaluating means from previous courses. So basically what's going to happen is, given this rational expression, wherever you see the variable x in this particular problem, you're going to substitute -3. So basically you're gonna go back to this expression, and in place of x, wherever you see the variable x, and you only see it here, you're going to substitute -3. So we get 4. So we're going to get equals 4 divided by 6 times, and then x is -3, so you say 6 times -3, and then plus 2. So that's where I'm at, okay? Then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to use the order of operations to simplify this. So the numerator, if you look at the numerator, there's just one number there, so that's going to stay 4. If you look at the denominator, you have a multiplication and an addition. So remember, the order of operations says I do multiplication first. So I get 6 times -3, that's -18, and then -18 plus 2. And then I add those, so I get 4 divided by -16, and then reduce if you can, you simplify if you can. And it's also, remember that a positive divided by negative is a negative, and then when I reduce 4/16, I'm going to get 1/4. So I get a -1/4. So that's your answer. So when x is -3, this rational expression is equal to -1/4. Okay? So notice you're going to have to use some ideas that you learned in previous courses. For instance, you learned about the order of operations. You learned about evaluating, the word evaluate, what that means. Okay? All right, number 2. Let's look at number 2. So in this case, in this rational expression, notice there's only one variable, the variable x, and so you're just going to substitute 4 into that variable x. So wherever you see the variable x, you're going to substitute 4. Now, just be careful if x was negative. If x was negative, see, like I had here, where x was negative, I put that value in parentheses. So it's always a good idea to put in parentheses. Now, when I substitute 4, I'm going to get 4 squared. Now, it is okay if you do this. That's fine. But if that was a -4, you would need to put parentheses around here. Okay, so that becomes important. All right, so I get 4 squared plus 6 times 4 plus 21 divided by, and then 4 plus 2. So where you saw the variable x, you substituted 4. Now let's look at the denominator for right now. So the denominator, I can deal with that right now. What's 4 plus 2? Okay, well that's 6, right? Okay, so my denominator is 6. Now in the numerator, using the order of operations, notice I have an exponent, I am multiplying, and then I'm adding. So you got to remember the order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So remember, exponents comes before multiplication. So if I square this, 4 times itself is 16. Okay? Then I can do the multiplication. So 6 times 4 is 24. So I get 16 plus 24 plus 21. All right? And then I add those three numbers. And when I add those three numbers, 16 plus 24, and you have access to a calculator. So if you use a calculator, you get 16 plus 24 plus 21, right? And so you get 61. So I get 61 divided by 6. All right. And you cannot reduce this, as you cannot simplify this. But if you wanted to, you can, since this is an improper fraction, you can change this to a mixed number. So you're going to say 6 into 61. And so 6 into 61, if you use your calculator, 61 divided by 6, you get 10, right? So 6 into 6 is 1, 10 and something. 1 times 6 is 6. bring down the 1, 6 into 0, I'm sorry, 6 into 1 is 0, 0 times 6 is 0, and you get 1. So you get 10 and 1 6. All right. Now remember, you see how you knew how you can see this 10 is this quotient right here. All right, but this remainder, this decimal part is 1/6. That's what that represents. So 1/6 represents this, and for this calculator, you have access to change this this decimal to a mixed number. And so remember how you do this. You see where you have that PRB button, but you see where it says F to D, D to F, so fraction to decimal, decimal to fraction. All you do now is press second and then press PRB, and you see this part, then press equal again, and you get 10 and 1/6. All right, so you can write it as 10 and 1/6. It does not matter. All right, but just leave it as 61 over 6, but you want to make sure you can reduce if you can, though. All right, so it's not reducible, so you can leave it like this. You can write as a mixed number, but just leave it as an improper fraction. Okay, now number 3, if you notice number 3, there are two variables, y and x, and notice that you're substituting for x, you're substituting 2, and for y, you're substituting 4. So remember the direction says to evaluate. So when you evaluate this, you're going to end up with, see this rational expression that contains variables? You're going to end up with numerical answers. So I had this numerical answer -1/4 for number 1. I had 61/6 for number 2. And so let's see what we get for number 3. So I get 3. So that's going to equal 3 times y. Y in this case is 4. Plus 6 divided by 2 times y. Y is 4 again. And then minus 2, right? Okay, minus x, and x in this case is 2. All right, if you look at the numerator, I have multiplication and addition. So if I do multiplication, well, we have to do multiplication first. So according to the order of operations, I have to do multiplication first. 3 times 4 is 12, so I get 12 plus 6, right? And then if I go directly to the denominator, I get 2 times 4 is 8, and so I get 8 minus 2. 8 minus 2. Now let's go back to the numerator. In the numerator, 12 plus 6 becomes 18, and then 8 minus 2 becomes 6, and I can simplify this. 18 divided by 6 is 3. So there's your answer. All right. So when I evaluate this expression for those two values for those variables, I get 3. Number 4. So again, you have, in this case, you have 3 variables. So notice that m is -3, n is 2, p is 9. So in place of those variables, you're going to substitute these values. So you're going to evaluate this rational expression for those values of the variables. So I'm going to get equals 3 times m. M is -3. Make sure you put that in parentheses. Definitely put in parentheses if you're substituting a negative value. Minus 6 times n. N is 2. Divided by p, which is 9, minus 4. Okay? All right, if you look at the denominator, and it didn't matter which one you go to first, but I went to the denominator first because that's easy to deal with. What's 9 minus 4? 9 minus 4 is 5. All right, let's look at the numerator. In the numerator, notice what you have. You have a multiplication, and a subtraction, right? So let's do this multiplication first. So I'm going to do the numerator in steps. So 3 times -3 is -9, so I get -9 minus 6 times 2, right? Now let's do this multiplication. So that becomes -9 minus 12 divided by 5, okay? And remember, -9 subtract 12 means the same thing as -9 plus a -12, and you did not have to write this. Most of you already know this. And then what's a -9 and a -12? -9 plus a -12. Well, -9 plus a -12 is a negative, what's that, 21 over 5? All right. And so you cannot reduce that. That cannot be simplified. But if you want to, you can write this as a mixed number. So you can say negative, and then just think about 5 divided to 21. So 5 into 21 is, what's that, 4? 4 times 5 is 20, remainder 1. So you get 4 and 1/5, -4 and 1/5. All right. And if you use your calculator, just kind of remind yourself about this. So if you go back to your calculator and you figure out what negative 21 divided by 5 is as a decimal, so negative 21 divided by 5 equals negative 4.2. Now remember, mathematically you read this as negative 4 and 2/10, right? Negative 4 and 2/10. But isn't 2/10 reduced 1/5? That's what that is. Now, if you want to, you can go ahead and use this button again. So you say second PRB, and then press equal, and notice you get negative 4 and 1/5. Okay? All right, number 5, we have this rational expression, and this time I want to substitute 0. So I get equal 0 divided by 0 subtract 9. The numerator stays 0. The denominator is a negative 9, right? And then what's 0 divided by negative 9? Well, 0 divided by negative 9 is 0. Okay? Now, be a little bit careful. So if I had this, I'm going to write this as an example for right now, because I do already have another number 6. But let's just suppose we had this instead. Let's suppose it was x minus 8 divided by x for x equals 0. I just want to remind you about this. So in place of, so I want to evaluate this when x is 0. So I'm going to substitute wherever you see the variable x, I'm going to substitute 0. So I get 0 minus 8 divided by 0, right? The numerator is a negative 8, the denominator is 0. Now remember, what do you say when you have a denominator 0? You say this is undefined. So you just write undefined. Here, 0 divided by negative 9, that's 0. So when the numerator is 0 and the denominator is a non-zero number, you say 0. But when the denominator is 0, that's undefined. All right, so just keep that in mind. Okay, number 6. So in number 6, we have this rational expression. And you want to evaluate that when x is negative 3. So in place of a, you're going to substitute negative 3. So I get 5 times a, which is negative 3, subtract 3. Divided by negative 3, right? Okay, the numerator, now notice the denominator is going to stay negative 3, but the numerator, I can simplify that. You do multiplication first before you subtract. So a negative 3 times positive 5 is a negative 15. So I get negative 15, subtract 3, divided by negative 3. And remember, a negative 15 and a negative 3 is a negative 18, divided by negative 3. And remember, a negative divided by negative is a positive, so do not leave it as negative or negative. All right, so that's going to imply you don't know how to deal with signed numbers. So you got to remember, negative divided by negative is a positive, and 18 divided by 3 is 6. So the answer is just 6. All right, number 7, you want to evaluate this rational expression when x is negative 2 and y is negative 3. All right, now it becomes very important. You see where you're squaring x? It becomes very, very important that since x is negative here, that you put that in parentheses. So that's negative 2 squared minus 5 times negative 2. You see, if you did not put that in parentheses, I just want to remind you, if you did not put that in parentheses and you had that, mathematically, what that means is that you're only squaring 2. That's what that means. And so if you only square 2, this becomes a negative 4. Okay? So you got to be careful. You got to remember those properties that you've learned in the past. So if you want negative 2 to be squared, then you got to put that in parentheses. See, those two are different things. So a negative 2 times itself is a positive 4. See the difference? Okay, so be careful. All right, you are squaring negative 2, so that's this one right here. So you see, that's why I put that in parentheses. Divided by, and then y is negative 3, and you're subtracting 6. Okay, so remember the order of operations. You have squaring, you have multiplication, and you have subtraction. So you're going to square first. A negative 2 times itself is a positive 4. So I get 4, subtract, and then let's go ahead and do the multiplication. 5 times negative 2 is a negative 10, right? All divided by a negative 3 and a negative 6 is a negative 9. So notice what the numerator looks like. See the subtraction? That subtraction right here, that's this. All right, and then 5 times a negative 2 is a negative 10. So you got to remember this. So I'm going to go off to the side and remind you about this. What is 4 subtract a negative 10? So you have access to a calculator, so your calculator can give it to you easily. But I just want to remind you about your rules. So remember when you have a subtraction problem, you can always change that to addition. So it becomes 4 plus. You change it to addition, you got to take the opposite of this number though. So what's the opposite of a negative 10? Well, that's a positive 10. So that becomes 14. So the numerator is just 14. Now, if you use your calculator, you'll see that is 14 because look, you're going to get 4, subtract, make sure you use the subtraction button, parentheses, a negative, make sure you use your negative button this time, negative, see how the difference? 10, close the parentheses and press equal, and you get 14. Now, here's how you want to write this though. See how you get 14 divided by negative 9? It does not matter if you leave it like this, but we tend to write this as a positive divided by negative is a negative, so we tend to just write it as negative 14/9, like that. But it does not matter. Either one of those is fine. Okay? And again, you can change this to a mixed number if you want to. And then finally, number 8. So number 8, so where we see the variable x, you're going to substitute 3. And where we see the variable y, you're going to substitute negative 4. So I'm going to get x, which is 3. I'm just going to go ahead and put that in parentheses. Minus 3 times y in parentheses, which is negative 4 squared. All right, so it is necessary that you put negative 4 in parentheses because you are squaring it. All right, and it's negative. It was not necessary to put this in parentheses. In other words, you could have written this as 3 squared minus 3 times negative 4 squared. All right, it does not matter. But if 3 was negative, that parentheses is needed, okay? All right. Divided by 7 times x is 3, minus y, which is a negative 4, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and put that in parentheses. All right, so let's work with the numerator for right now. Notice I'm squaring, then you're multiplying, see, 3 times, and then you're subtracting. So that's going to become a little bit challenging for us if we don't remember some properties. So I'm going to go ahead and just rewrite the numerator right here. Okay, so I'm going to get 3 squared minus 3 times a negative 4 squared. All right, so remember the order of operations says I do exponents first. So I have 2 of them here, so let's go ahead and do both of them. So that's going to be 3 squared is 9 minus 3 times a negative 4 squared is 16, right? Okay, now I have a multiplication and subtraction left. So which one do I do first? I got to do multiplication first. So I get 9 minus, and then 3 times 16 is 48. Okay, and then I do subtraction. 9 subtract 48 is going to be, what's that? 39. Okay, is it 39? Yeah, 39. Okay, so 9. Just use your calculator if you need to. It's actually negative 39, right? Okay, so 9 subtract 48 is a negative 39. So that's the numerator. And then the denominator, if you want to do the same thing, you can. Just do the work on the side. So you have 7 times 3 minus a negative 4. So I do multiplication before I subtract, right? So that's 21. Subtract a negative 4. And some students have a little bit issue with this. You got to remember that when you subtract a negative or subtract a positive, it doesn't matter. But just remember that you can always change subtraction to addition. To do that, though, to change that to addition, you got to take the opposite of this number. So the opposite of negative 4 is a positive 4, and then 21 plus 4 is 25. So I get negative 39 divided by 25, and I cannot reduce that. So that's the answer. Okay, so one of the things you have to be able to do with rational expressions is to evaluate rational expressions. Okay, so that's the first thing that's usually talked about when you first study rational expressions, and that's how do I evaluate them? And that's it. That's all you do. All right, so that's going to be the end of this lesson.